So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the afternoon sessions of Emerge, India's foremost sports and opportunities conclave. We start off this afternoon session with an extremely elite panel to discuss the business of sports. Let me introduce the moderator of today's panel, Mr. Venki Mysore. Mr. Venki Mysore is the CEO of Kolkata Knight Riders and Red Chillies Entertainment. Transforming team management in a young league like the IPL, Venki has been the gold standard in sports franchise management. Expanding their presence into the Caribbean Premier League, Venki is one of the biggest influencers in cricket and the business of sports. I will hand it over to him. Please welcome Mr. Venki Mysore.
Thank you, Pranav, for that very kind introduction. To start with, Rajivji, thank you, and thanks to IMC for arranging this session and giving us an opportunity to share our thoughts on a very topical subject. I have the rare privilege of the opportunity of moderating this session and having some experts here that have a lot to share, and at the same time it's a great opportunity for me to pick up on some of these points. And it's also a double pleasure that all three of them are very good friends and we have a lot of conversations, and so it's great to bring everybody together. So thank you to all three of them, Sanjog and Anand and Yannick, for taking the time out to be here. So just to everybody is known very well, so they don't need any introduction, but let me take a couple of minutes to quickly introduce our panel here. Let me start with Sanjog. Sanjog is a very close friend, and we've had many interactions over the years. As head of sports for Disney Star India, Sanjog has been, I mean, to me, when I think of broadcasting, cricket, IPL, BCCI stuff, ICC tournaments, the real key anchor there is Sanjog, and so he's my go-to man whenever I have any question, and I do bother him a lot with various types of things. But he has delivered some marquee tournaments and absolutely has done a fabulous job of it. He's also played a very significant role in driving other sports like Pro Kabaddi and ISL. And in addition to that, has really championed several grassroots development programs in partnership with the ministry and the government, particularly with the launch of Khelo India. And most recently, he was reappointed, not surprisingly, as the chair of the sports committee at FICCI, and he plays a key role in that. And for me, he's a very strong influencer in the area of sports, not just cricket, but a very broad-based role there. Moving on, Anand. Anand is an investment professional, and he is the founder and managing director of Fidelis, which is a PE fund focused primarily on growth equity in the sectors of technology, media, and entertainment and lifestyle. Has a great passion for sports. We met, I don't know, 8-9 years ago when we spoke a lot about sports and professionalism and investments, and comes with a wealth of experience, 35 years of experience across India and various countries around the world. Managed significant amounts of money over the last 12 years, over 5 billion in investments in very diversified spaces. So we really look forward to hearing from him. And finally, Yannick. Yannick has also been a really close friend, and we've had many opportunities to interact. But most recently, among other things he has done, Yannick is the co-founder of FanCode, and his vision for FanCode is to create a single destination for all the needs of sports fans. And being a sports fan himself, I think had a great deal of insight and empathy in terms of what fans are looking for. So being able to connect the evolved sports audience with relevant content, community, commerce, etc. So there's some very interesting ideas that'll be discussed.
Sir, you're muted. Sir, you're muted.
Oh, my back? No.
Yep.
I don't know. I didn't touch it, but
No, yeah, you're back.
something
You're back.
happened. Okay. So prior to Fanport, as I was saying, Yannick was part of the international leadership team of NBA and also the managing director of the India business. Spent 6 years there, and he was instrumental in driving the grassroots program for NBA and basketball in India, setting up academies, building partnerships, licensing, content, marketing. So we have an amazing panel here, and I think we can get started on some of the discussions. So I'm just going to start off by posing a few questions and then ask the panelists to, in whichever order they wish to pick up on that. I think one of the things that is very topical right now is how sports consumption is happening, particularly in the context of what we've all been through over the last year in the pandemic. And just to set the stage a little bit here, and thinking about it from a fan standpoint, thinking about it from a broadcaster standpoint, we've had to reimagine the business in many different ways. And how do you play without crowds, and how do you still give that kind of experience to the fans? How do you engage with them? Perhaps I'll ask Sanjog to take a crack at this, because most recently he has orchestrated the staging of IPL. Happened in October, November of 2020 in UAE, and now we're on the verge of doing this. So we can probably quickly go around. I think, Sanjog, after your comments, I'll ask Yannick to address the same point on what are the trends that we are seeing, how have we adapted to this environment, and what should we be expecting in the very near future. So Sanjog, if you would take it first, and then over to Yannick, and then to Anand, please.
Thanks, Venki. I think the last 12 months have been, without meaning to sound insensitive, given the kind of human tragedy that we have seen unfold before our eyes, totally unprecedented, have been challenging, but also almost to some extent forcing us to reinvent ourselves, as you rightly said. I think two things stand out for me over the last 12 months. One is, I think for all of us as stakeholders in sport, the last 12 months have demonstrated the power and value of sport, which we saw in the way fans longed for sport when sport was off. And I think the last 12 months have also perhaps given us a renewed sense of purpose for sport, because at times we are so deeply involved in sport as an activity that we perhaps forget the larger societal purpose that sport has. And we saw that unfold in a way seen before with the IPL. Effectively, I remember this meme or this GIF that was created where the national sentiment kept dropping with news of rising cases, lockdown 1, lockdown 2, lockdown 3. And then there is an IPL bugle and the sentiment starts changing. And that's pretty much what the purpose.
I think Sanjog is frozen.
Did we lose Sanjog?
I think there is an internet issue from his side. He's frozen.
Which the IPL.
Yeah.
Which.
Oh,
Sanjog was on mute for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I think the internet connection may have been a little unstable.
Yeah. You're back.
I think for me, two things stand out, and I'll just quickly mention them. One is, of course, the purpose of sport for all of us as stakeholders, which was re-emphasized, reiterated, and re-articulated like never before this year, where all of us took upon ourselves the responsibility of staging the IPL, because we genuinely felt the IPL was not just about sport being played, it was about changing the national sentiment of a country that had been ravaged by a pandemic that it had never seen before. And on the other side, it also, for me, re-emphasized the role that sport plays in the lives of people, where it has the ability to, one, deliver joy and happiness like no other thing can, but even more than that, deliver a sense of togetherness like nothing else can, even in times of physical distancing. So I think for me, the last 12 months perhaps have been cathartic in the sense that they've really shown to all of us the role and purpose of sport as being something which a society and our nation greatly needs. But even more so as stakeholders, the responsibility we have of ensuring that sport continues to deliver on the larger objectives that it has, towards its fans and towards the national sentiment. I don't know if that answers the tactical question that you had posed around the challenges of staging the event, but I'm sure we'll come back to that in any case.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot for that, Sanjay. I think that was very good. There'll be, I'm sure, supplementary type of questions to this. So, Yannick, if you can pick up from there on the whole environment in which we are operating and how we've had to adapt to this, and therefore some of the, from your perspective, from a fan court perspective, or purely from your business perspective, how you've seen it evolve.
Yeah, I think I think the major impact of the pandemic across everything, right? And sports obviously is an important part of what people consume. But I think the major impact is the way consumption patterns have changed in consumers. Like, I mean, like I've been sitting in a cave, like, look at me, my long hair, my long beard, for over a year now, since the lockdown. But I'm still watching as much sport as, and much more sport than I did in the past. I'm doing things a lot differently. And I think that change and shift in consumption pattern that I know that Sanjog and Star and you guys have all seen has been dramatic. You know, Venki, you and I were talking about this yesterday. And if you look at, if 2 years back, someone had told us that people would be excited about watching a game without crowds in the stadium for any sport, we would have said, you're mad. Right? There's no way that a consumer can be engaged in a live game on television, on digital, without seeing crowds. But consumers have adapted to it. Consumers have actually thrived. Their consumption pattern. I think the shift in consumption patterns in the last 12 months is generational, right? It's the amount of the way that sports fans have shifted, the way they consume sports, has been something that's would probably have taken 10 years or 12 years. It's just been so rapid. And I think with that, comes the opportunity, or, as Sanjog said, the responsibility of stakeholders to be able to cater to that, to be able to make sure that the consumer who's watching the game at the empty stadium, like you guys did an amazing job, you create replications, right? You can't do the exact thing, but you pipe in audience noises for the television user. You have these massive LED boards which have fans in it. And even for fans sitting at home, normally sports is a very group activity, right? You sit together and watch a live India game. I know Hotstar has done this, watch with fans together in like a room, in a chat room. So there's innovations around what digital and technology can do to cater to that those changing consumer patterns. I think that potential, we've just hit the tip of the iceberg, and that's really the opportunity we at FanCode see. And I know that all distributors of content and all people who work with sports fans see across the world, is that this consumption pattern has moved rapidly, and obviously given businesses in sport and in most have been built brick by brick over the last 4 or 5 decades. Making that switch, the opportunity to make that switch and cater to those changing consumption patterns is massive. And using technology to actually do that, whether it's doing multiple commentaries or multiple commentary feeds without having 6-7 commentary feeds without having 6-7 studios, whether it's actually the watch a game with friends on video chat, whether it's data overlays. There's just so much technology can do, and I think this is the tip of the iceberg on that, and it's our job to catch up really quickly with consumption changes right now.
Terrific. Thank you for that. I'll just add 1 or 2 things that we had picked up on in some of our conversations, and then hand it over to Anand. I think I'd like to hear from him from an investor's perspective, how he sees this particular aspect. But it's very interesting because when Sanjog and I were talking a few months ago, just before the last IPL season, what we're trying to solve for is that, like we said, okay, pandemic, for obvious reasons, there can't be crowds. But on the one hand, there is a consumer who's sitting in front of a television station, a television screen, and or a device and consuming the content that's out there. But then on the other hand, how do you get that interactiveness going for players? I mean, you talk to the players, they're like, that's something that the initial reaction was, oh, we're going to miss that, obviously. I mean, I was talking to Andre Russell and he was telling me about playing in front of 70,000 people in Eden Gardens and what that does to him at that crucial moment when he's trying to win a game or do something special on the field. So how do you use technology and that interface to bring that about? So there were some of the innovation that we have seen across sports in the global space, and particularly what Star did last year was quite amazing. So we can come back to that. So Anand, over to you. You as you wear your investor hat and you're putting money into the space, you said something yesterday which struck a chord, which basically says, listen, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the business of sports. So you've got to take that seriously and not look at it differently just because it's sport, because there are serious investors who are putting money into it. So I think it'll be great to hear that perspective.
Sure. So let me just, I think on the specific question that you had raised or asked Sanjog and Yannick, one of the things we looked at and we said, this whole thing revolves around people, and whatever Sanjog does or Yannick does, you need the people. And if you don't have them, even during these phases, you're not supporting them. So empathy for me was number one. It was not about shutting shop. It was ensuring that we were able to continue. If we had to defer some, we deferred it, but it is to make sure that the pain was not immediately felt by people. We knew that this was going to be a temporary thing. It's just that we didn't know how long, right? So we all had to endure it. And I think it was a time for us as investors to ensure that we deal with our management teams in a manner where we give them support. And likewise, they do for their people, because you never know when Star is going to start up again and say, hey, listen, I need this delivered tomorrow. You need to be ready with it. If you can't do that, then they are gone, we're gone. It's not, there's no continuity to it. So I think people have seen a lot of this happen in the past, but the human element of it is being experienced for the first time, and I think that's why I think for us, empathy was number one. You just couldn't say, I want to reduce my expenses. I'm only going to take a look at my, bottom line EBITDA right now. It doesn't work that way. I think what you need to be doing is to make sure that you can extend your runway a little bit and making sure you get there where it could be delayed by a year or whatever. But empathy has to play and had to play, and it really did well for us, So that was very important. And then coming back to your point, I think we need to bring the sports, not just put it in a bucket. I mean, bring it into mainstream, If I throw some numbers at you, maybe you will ask me this later, but I'm just going to do it now. The United States is a $90 billion market. China is about $50 billion. You take Australia is between 15 and 20 billion. We are scratching the surface at about 5 billion, So just look at the opportunity that we have and what needs to get done as far as investments are concerned, not only in broadcasting and our athletes, the entire infrastructure. And I'm sure, Venki, you may have questions more to that specific topic, and I'm going to reserve that for a little later. But the key is, yes, quickly, make sure that we're all doing the right things, we survive and provide the support. And that was a theme for us. Take care of people.
Absolutely. I think well put in terms of just what the potential is, because see, at the end of the day, as you said, in this environment, survival is success, and we've all found ways to operate within the constraints that have been imposed on us. Just to sort of look at it a little bit, because we've heard about in various contexts, we've talked in terms of how do you see this going forward? Somebody made a comment to me saying that innovation is going to actually compete with how fast the vaccine is going to come out. So, if the sooner the vaccine comes out, are we going to be happy going back to the way we were doing business? I think that's a point, Yannick, you were making when we were chatting yesterday, is that, we're all sort of habituated to doing things a certain way. So would sport be happy to go back the way we were and we were operating, or do you see the innovation that has already come into play and things that we've actually got quite excited about, is that going to change the way? And talking like, listening to some of the futurists who talk in terms of where this business is going, the business of sport, where it's going. Do you see that, we can go in reverse order if you like, Anand. Do you see that changing from your perspective? And then we can do Yannick and Sanjog to comment on that subject.
Yeah, no, listen, I hope it doesn't. And I hope it doesn't, because I think there was an overlap there. There's something wrong here. Can you hear me well?
We can hear you now.
Yes.
We can hear you.
Okay. No, listen, I hope it doesn't. I think everybody, not just in sports, right? I think they've found that balance of life, and what I've seen in businesses, there are more effective meetings that we're having these days, and more often, without having to travel as much. And it's become, and I do think that the new innovations will make sports a much better place and a much better viewed property as well. So that is going to be, that's my view, right? And I think there are more and more things that can be done. I'm sure FanCode is working on a number of things, and how Sanjog and Star are going to deliver those into the television, into people's room is going to be very different and based around the world. So there's nothing as such as going back. I think what you've seen is you can, with what happened in COVID, expand the fan base. And that fan base still needs to cater to beyond India. And I think you've done that very well. And I think such technologies will continue to grow. And I think this has been a great learning for all of us from this pandemic.
Yannick, any thoughts from your side on that point? I know you brought that up yesterday as well.
Yeah, I agree with. There's some overlap on this. I agree with Anand that there's no going back, right? Once you've, I think the behavioral habits of consumers that have changed due to the pandemic will continue. And I think the challenge for us right now is to continue innovating, continue to make sure that we continue delivering value to consumers. And that's really what we at FanCode, and I think a lot of other players within this industry will continue doing, in a sense that it's if you listen to a lot of commentary around not just sports, right, but around consumer habits across various kind of things, whether it's e-commerce or whether it's the way things get delivered and things around that. There's digital and technology around digital has been accelerated by about 10 years. What would have taken at least I believe, what would have taken in India consumers to adopt various forms of technology, maybe 8 to 10 years, the pandemic has kind of accelerated those behaviors and pulled it in front. So I don't think there's anything going back. I think it's a question of all the stakeholders in the market now accepting that and continue to deliver more and more value to consumers on the back of it.
I agree, Venki. I think there is no going back now. In fact, the interesting thing that Yannick said, which I'd just like to highlight, is if anything, the pandemic has acted as an accelerant for some of the trends or patterns in consumer behavior that we were already seeing evolve. I'll share a couple of anecdotes. I remember last year at some point watching a game at a friend's place, and he had a 3-year-old daughter who was watching the game with us, and she was doing her own thing. And then at some point, it was a flat screen TV that we were watching the game on. She happened to walk across to the TV and tried to swipe it, and obviously nothing happened because and the look on her face was that of disappointment, because this was a child who had consumed most of her media on an iPad or on her father's phone, and thus was used to the screen responding to her. And suddenly, this big screen that her father and her father's friend were watching the game on refused to respond, which was of immense disappointment. So I think fundamentally, consumption patterns had started evolving rapidly over the last 5 to 7 years, what Yannick spoke of. What has happened is, over the last year, though the change that would have taken us, as Yannick was saying, several years, has been forced upon us in a matter of a year itself. So there's no going back. Although the one thing that I would say, and this is a thought for everyone who's involved in this business, at the end of the day, this business is fundamentally about putting the fan first, right? And it is the fan who comes first, whose consumption, whose behavior, whose interests, whose inclinations have evolved rapidly and will continue to evolve. We don't know what's on the anvil 2 years, 3 years from now, and what major technology change are we going to see, which will force us to almost revisit the way that we do things. Having said that, the one thing that won't change is the focus on the fan. And that's the one thing that we've more or less stuck to as a principle all through this pandemic. And going back to some part of your earlier question, I think that's the principle that actually carried us through the last 12 months or so. Fundamentally, what is it that we tried to do when we were reimagining the IPL experience? And you and I had several rounds of conversations about this. We were not saying we were trying to make up for the lack of crowds. We said the crowds are very much there. They just happen to be sitting in front of a screen or a device at home. And what we needed to do was we needed to create an experience which involved them instead of only those fans who were inside the stadium. So we weren't trying to compensate for the lack of fans in the stadium. We were actually trying to create the grammar for a more integrated, inclusive experience, which involved not just the 70,000 fans who sit in Eden Gardens, but the many hundreds of millions of fans who watch that KKR game. And I think that's the fundamental shift in thinking that the pandemic forced upon us, but was coming in any case. And I think that's where, fundamentally we need to continue to really push the envelope as far as experiences are concerned, continue to put the fan first, and adapt to the world around us and adopt what can potentially elevate the experience in the future. And if we stay true to those principles, then I think, as Anand rightly said, this industry will continue to grow rapidly in years to come.
Well said. I think, at the end of the day, application of technology, the various tools that we are creating, and the innovation that is around it is all to, at some fundamental level, drive our businesses. And we're all professionals here and looking at the subject itself of the business of sports. And what we discovered during this pandemic and the kind of opportunities that it created, I'll just give you one or two small examples on ways in which we were able to add some significantly new value or added value to our partners and our sponsors. Because at the end of the day, that's what they're looking at. They're looking at things that are give them value. And therefore, we have been in a position where, for example, the standard thing that we do, which is like a meet and greet situation, that is one of the deliverables to a sponsor. And in a normal year, what we would do is we would have a banquet hall and we would have players show up there, and there'll be X number of people, and they could only invite X number of people because of the costs involved in that, and then just the logistics of bringing them to Calcutta or wherever. But we were able to actually turn that on its head and basically open it up. Like you said, Sanjog, it's not a 70,000 stadium right now. It's a multi-million virtual stadium, if you will. So similarly, we actually did one interesting meet and greet where our content crew was roaming around during a practice session. And we opened that up through a Zoom to the sponsor, who were able to invite multiple numbers of their people from wherever they were. And the types of questions that were asked and the interactive nature of it. Now, all of a sudden, everybody wants that. And then we started creating certain digital assets as well, to be able to sort of create something which is these days, call it snacky, whatever, that's the terminology that's used. But this forced us to not only innovate, but what it started doing, Anand, from your perspective, from where you sit as an investor, is that it starts creating opportunities to monetize this and to start growing the business. So I think it just opens up new vistas, if you will. So that was our experience, but I'm sure you've seen it as well from each of your perspectives. Yannick, also from a fan court perspective, any insights on new ways to monetize that you've been able to figure out, which helps us grow the business?
Yeah, I think, and for us, the most important, the primary philosophy that we've built our business around is that we are first and foremost a direct-to-consumer company, right? So when you start with that, then you're essentially, at least philosophically, not encumbered by your responsibility to another customer, very important customer in the industry, which is an advertiser. So we've essentially built our business, which is ad-free. Not to say we'll not get ads in future, but we believe as we're building a product, we have to add value to a consumer, and the consumer will reward us with the value that they're delivering by paying us. So we've been very focused on saying, how do you actually monetize a consumer directly? And what that allows you to do by making sure that you personalize, that you keep flexible payment options, or flexible ways to monetize a consumer directly. It allows you to lower entry barriers for a consumer to play on digital. And it also allows you to charge premiums for assets within experiences. So if you think about it, right, during the Caribbean Premier League, which obviously Venki, you have a team, and Star also did the TV broadcast of, we started with match passes for the first time, where consumers could come on and their entry barrier to watch a live game on digital was 5 rupees. Right, which was the lowest that they ever had. So that was extremely effective. The second entry barrier was you didn't have to be a monthly or annual subscriber of Fanco to watch the Caribbean League. You could buy a tour pass, which was 49 rupees. So that helped us. We believe that helped us and will help us continue to grow the ecosystem. What we will continue to do is use that flexibility to also charge premiums. So then you can actually say, okay, here's a match pass for 5 rupees, but for 4 rupees more, you get to listen to 7 different commentary feeds. Right? Or you take the entire, the Bundesliga, you buy the annual Bundesliga subscription. You got every game of Bayern Munich, you can watch it for 199 rupees. But you pay 200 rupees more and you get a Bayern Munich jersey. Right? So the ability to monetize consumers directly, I think, is one of the biggest opportunities that sports has, whether it's through content, whether it's through commerce, whether it's through education, sports education, right? Whether it's training. The ability to now, you don't have to set up a physical academy. You can actually do it from home. Think about Sachin Tendulkar being able to run 1,000 classes of, his cover drive, or teaching kids his cover drive now without having to physically use his time to go to different places. So I think the monetization ability, once again, and we keep coming back to the impact of the last year, but I think the monetization ability has also grown significantly. And even in the other aspect, right, advertising, which is a very, very important part of the sports business, Hotstar has done an amazing job in building ad tech, where advertisers are able to target the consumers they want, rather than say, okay, I'm going to put it on this channel and then hope that it reaches, 100 million people, of which 5 million people may be part of my target audience. So they've used digital to actually build ad tech solutions where you can actually target the clients, people who are relevant to you. Our sister company Dream11 is very focused on the paid fantasy game on a certain target segment, which is adults between 18 to 24 or 21 to 25, whatever the category is. I don't know off the top of my head. You can address that through a Hotstar right now because you're able to segment audiences in live. So once again, I think the opportunity to monetize is an innovation that has been accelerated. Again, we keep using the same word, but I think it's just, you know, technology allows you to do that at scale and allow you to learn. You know, you learn really quickly whether 5 is the right price or 2 rupees, 9 rupees the right, because the consumers are that feedback loop, which otherwise took you in the old direct to consumer offline days, right? Which Venki, you were a part of also. It took you weeks to find out. Now you can find out in seconds, in minutes, and you can keep adjusting and adapting your feedback loop. You can keep running tests, A/B and experimentation, which we do all the time. So yeah, I think monetization and the expansion of the ability to monetize is something that is another really, really big plus point in the digital environment that we've kind of, you know, hoping to capitalize on.
Brilliant. A quick point on that, Sanjog, when we spoke, you said something about live streaming versus the digital long tailing of the digital assets that you create, which again goes to the point of monetization and how one could bring in certain types of innovation with that. You want to touch upon that?
Yeah, Venki, we're in the business of attention, right? Whatever gets attention effectively gets monetized, right? It's almost an attention economy that we now operate in, at least on the media and entertainment, and perhaps even on the sports side, increasingly so. So what Yannick's talking about with respect to direct to consumer is if there is a way for you to have frictionless monetization of that attention, it will always unlock more value. All of us, I'm sure, have read about NBA unlocking value using NFTs, right? Which again is a direct to consumer merchandising opportunity. I mean, principally it's very similar to merchandising, but what digital capabilities or digitization is allowing us to do is to really unlock its full potential. So you're no longer restricted by the distribution impediments that present themselves. You have the ability to cater to every fan of the game the way he or she wants it by way of personalization, and then extracting real value for that personalization or that experience that you're delivering. The interesting thing about live sport, and you know that this is where the dichotomy of live sport comes in. Live sport fundamentally at scale is about aggregation and it's about congregation, right? It's about aggregation of audiences all watching at the same time. And it's interesting, the point that Yannick was making, while the way that we've looked to monetize audiences and attention, as I said, on Disney Plus Hotstar may be different from the way that it's monetized on TV. But fundamentally, what we've noticed is as far as scaled offerings such as cricket are concerned, consumption patterns don't change much. Because what's happening is, at the end of the day, the real unique value that sport delivers, that no other form of entertainment is able to deliver, is the ability to aggregate audiences at scale at a certain point of time. It's true to its nature that at that point of time, you feel a sense of togetherness and a sense of community. And that creates additional value for the advertiser at that point, because of that much more attention being garnered by sport, all happening at one go. I think the other opportunity which Yannick alluded to some extent is actually in sports which are not of the same scale, where the ability to find your fan has gone up tremendously if you're a direct-to-consumer business, right? So while cricket, is popular across the length and breadth of the country, so it's practically impossible for any cricket broadcast to not find a fan, there are enough and more sports in our ecosystem that are now, or that have the possibility of now finding a niche for themselves by going straight to or direct to consumer. And I think that's where the real value unlock will start happening in the sports ecosystem as far as what technology allows us to do. And that to me is perhaps a more significant value unlock than the additional value that we may be able to create on a sport which is already as popular and already has such high levels of recall and already generates so much revenue by way of advertising and subscription as cricket does. And that to me is, over the next 3 to 5 years, perhaps the one thing that can propel us towards becoming a multi-sport nation more than anything else.
Terrific. Anand, just circling back with to you on the business perspective, as you see it as an investor. I mean, I know that having spent a few years in financial services, my previous life, as an investor, the things that you look for. So are you as an investor excited about what you're seeing? Are you seeing that there is enough?
You muted yourself. Yeah.
I don't know. Somebody is doing it, or it's
Sorry. This happened due to me. Sorry.
No problem. No problem. Thanks. So, I mean, in terms of the business, I mean, when you look at the entrepreneurial ideas and the innovation and the growth, the whole growth story that is happening there, which may have been, as others have already put it, may have got accelerated due to the pandemic, which has forced us to think in a different way. Are you sufficiently excited about it, or are you feeling that there isn't enough still happening? And in the context of India, I mean, you very well put it in terms of numbers and just seeing the potential. So it'll be great to hear that perspective from you.
Yeah, so I'll take it. I'll split into two parts, right? One is, to come to your first question, I'm extremely excited. I look at the teams or the management and the promoters, entrepreneurs in India. They are extremely on the ball, and they are not only wanting to cater to India, but wanting to take it and scale it globally. And I have seen, as far as my fund is concerned, it's a Southeast Asia and India fund, but I haven't seen promoters and entrepreneurs like in India. If I take a look at investments in Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, Singapore, they want to remain within their geographies. It doesn't quite fit my strategy. I have seen entrepreneurs really in India, and I think one of my companies is working with all of you guys. Really proud of it. And again, it's the quality of the management team. It's a quality of people who have been and who have seen what they are seeing. So directly to answer your question, extremely, extremely positive about what's happening. I just can't lay my hands on some of those companies today that are seeking money for the growth perspective, right? It's amazing. The larger part though, and we're all ancillaries, whether it be Sanjog, whether it be Yannick, or whether it be me, or whether it be you, right? Venki, we're all ancillary to the basic concept of sports. If that doesn't happen, then there's nothing for any one of us, right? So when I talk to you about the numbers, just look at it. I mean, we need to start investing in the sports infrastructure in this country. I know it's come a long way. I know the government has been fantastic in identifying these things, and it is moving. But I think we need to put it on a fast track. Sports medicine, sports management institutes. I mean, what you need to create is something in the mind of youngsters that this job provides me with good money. It'll take care of my family. I can take care of people. It's not, you don't have to be an engineer, a doctor, or anything else. The industry is bigger than the athlete today. So you need to ensure, once you have that, you'll get enough number of athletes coming in as well. So you need to, today, if something happens for an orthoscopic surgery, we have Dr. Anand in India, fantastic, but then we fly people out to Australia and South Africa. Shouldn't happen. If we are given an opportunity to create these things in India, I'm just giving you an example. So in education, in training, in everything, if we can do that and put it on a fast track, just imagine the opportunity of sports business in India. That then quadruples what Sanjog is doing, what Yannick is doing. It creates more fans, it creates more consumers, it creates more investments, So I think that is the key. And I think we are very proud because we bring a specific role that we play as well from a governance perspective. It's very important. You just don't go in there and you say, my company, supports Star. I want my companies to ensure that they're institutionalized, that they provide their businesses in a very professional manner, that you just don't do it overnight. You're there for years to come. And at the same time, we keep innovating. Those are the kinds of companies that I like. Those are the kinds of teams I like. And that's why I'm very interested in what happens in India today. But I'm just looking at it and I'm saying, Wow, what an opportunity we have in India. I was actually listening to the first, panel this morning when they all were talking about how we have great athletes and there was nothing before, and they were all, very successful. Just imagine with what they've got now, we are seeing what's happening. And look, if we can just get into that Australia or the Japan or the China type of investments that we can do in our economy, nobody can touch us. Forget about medals that US is bringing to the table. We're going to take everything. Why not look at it that way? So yeah, I'm absolutely optimistic, Venki.
Anand, sorry, Venki,
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead,
make a point to Anand. Anand, at times too much is made of elite athletes and our performance at the highest stage, and not enough is said or made about the fundamental building block of sport, which is the culture itself.
Yep.
And I think, while I agree with the first part of what you spoke of with respect to the importance of promoting sport as much as a lifestyle choice, as a career aspiration, as a recreational activity, I tend to at times worry when too much is made of how many medals we're winning, and that is used almost as an indicator for the health of sport in this country. To my mind, and putting on my hat as chair of the FICCI Sports Committee, I think the medals and the performances and the victories and the triumphs are all important because they inspire a country and they inspire kids to play and they inspire kids to aspire. But they're outcomes.
Sure.
And I think it's important for private participation in sport to recognize the fact that the real value unlock in sport will happen when we shift from being a country that prioritizes academics over sport to being a country that offers the choice to a kid to pursue education as seriously as he or she wants to, as sport as he or she may want to.
I agree with you, Sanjog. I'm glad you clarified it. I'm just bringing that session from the morning who talked about medals. I don't want this to be a medal thing either. If we focus on the fundamentals, everything happens. It's a consequence.
Yeah.
And we don't have to think about it at all. That's why I'd like everybody to focus on the grassroots, on the infrastructure, get that right, and everything else will follow. Fully agree with you.
Yeah, and on fans, right? Because it's the fan of today who is the amateur participant of tomorrow and who becomes an elite athlete that Venki Mysore pays crores of rupees to pick up in the auction,
Sure.
right? And I'm sure he has enough and more stories of kids he has picked up from nowhere who perhaps benefited from being in a community or being a part of a culture that never forced the kid to choose between academics and cricket. And when I say choose, it's an obvious choice when someone forces someone to choose in this country between academics and cricket or sport for that matter.
And bring it into the mainstream, let it be like any other profession. Let people have some security that this is also amazing.
Yeah, and I think to that point, and you brought up governance and regulation, Anand, and you didn't mention regulation, but I'd like to add regulation to it. I think it's important for the government, while it does its bit to continue investing in sports and in grassroots development, to also make the investment climate for sport a lot better. I think at times we as stakeholders are perhaps guilty of not building the narrative around how sport is also an element in nation building enough for the government to give sport its due recognition. So much is made again of medals and Olympic performance, etc., that the softer aspects of what evolution of sport can do for a country, both in terms of development within the country, but also for the individual, that needs to be recognized. And I think private participation in sport needs to be incentivized a lot more than it is today. It's almost seen at par with many other economic activities that happen in the country. While sport doesn't just contribute with with tax, in terms of tax revenues. It contributes in so many more ways that it needs to almost be treated as a special sector, which requires a very different kind of regulation towards its development.
I echo your sentiments, absolutely.
Let me just add a couple of things, and then in the remaining few minutes, we'll try and cover some aspects of the business in terms of governance and regulation that you were talking about. But one of the things that that we get really excited about is just the leadership that's coming out of India in this space. Because I mean, let's talk in the context of building franchises and what we do. And I'm just going to take our example a little bit, just to illustrate the point, is that as I travel around the world, and one of the ways in which we have found opportunities for growth is just because of the limitation in terms of the duration of each league that takes place, is for us to say, let's build a model, a really robust model that is working well, and be confident of that in our home base, which is India. And then let's try and globalize this, replicate this model in different parts of the world. So that's how we've had whatever success we've had in the Caribbean. And when we went into South Africa, of course, that league will take off. They've had their challenges, but more recently, the entry and the investment we made in the US, and there are a couple of other conversations that are going on. But more importantly, when I have these conversations and when I talk about our model and what value we bring, I mean, and some of these are very mature markets, like the US, for example. And they look at us, and we're very nimble-footed, and we're very fleet-footed, and we're able to say, this is what we have done, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one side of it, where the leadership, and I call this our hub and spoke model, the hub being India, and then you're sort of, taking it out into different markets. But the second aspect of it is the talent that's coming out here. I mean, the kind of the young energy and the talent that we are getting to see, and kids making commitments to get into sports management and specializing in areas like digital, specializing in, there are so many types of, and when they come and talk about stuff that they've done and how they've gone out, got educated, come back, they want to build their careers, it's fascinating to see that. So I just thought I'll make that point. Last but not least, I think each of us can comment on this, because we've all invested heavy amounts of monies into our respective businesses, and at the same time, I think Anand, you made that point yesterday when we were talking, that we shouldn't for any reason take this lightly, because it's sports, and it's a fun thing, because at the end of the day, it's business, and somebody is writing a check, when they wake up, and that accountability and that level of governance that is needed, and the discipline of running the business. So I think it'll be great to just go around and hear from each of you on how your respective businesses see that. So Anand, you first, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So that is something that for us, it's foremost, right? If we cannot run a company, if we cannot run a portfolio company like an institution, they need to understand what it takes to create value, and for them to have that accountability. Then we just stay away from it, because whatever value you create can just evaporate the next day. We want to make sure that we are sustainable businesses, and we are going to make sure that it can continue beyond our investment, and it continues to grow, right? There's going to be no greed on either side, because every one of us has a cycle, of creating investments and creating that value. And we can only do so much. But I think we are in a very unique space of that growth. It's not, it's the early growth stage, where it's very easy for us to convince the team that you need to run a business in a certain way to ensure that your clients look at you and say, yes, this is a credible way of doing things. And you are sticking to your timelines. You're ensuring that you feed them with innovations that can change things around for them, for us as well. And we ensure that that is the way to do business. And there is not only a responsibility from a business to a client, but from a business upwards to us as investors as well. It is equally has to flow both ways. We do not at all interfere in the operations of any company, but we do take pride of lending a hand in the strategic side of things, where we want to make sure that we stay ahead of innovations, we stay ahead of markets, we stay ahead and try and see where we scale things. That is a huge advantage in India, Venki, when you said the leadership and the people of quality that are coming out. We've seen that they're embracing it with open arms because we are global in India. You took an example of the United States. They're not global. People haven't visited a country outside for a majority of their population. That's the biggest difference I see, that people in India are open, are willing to embrace, they're willing to embrace change. But again, coming back to the point of how to run things, I think governance and accountability is very important for us. And I think my grounding in JP Morgan for 20 years is basically brought that out. And my entire team is very proud of what heritage they come out of. So it is very important that we put that back and we give that into our portfolio company build up. So very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Yannick, Dream Sports has been one of the much talked about initiatives with Fan Code and Dream 11 stuff that you've done, and investors, and from a business perspective, your comments on that?
Yeah, listen, I mean, to what I completely agree to what Anand said. I think it's a double-edged sword, right? We are all blessed to be working in an industry which we are so passionate about. I mean, when I worked in the NBA, I used to get up in the morning to watch games at 5:30. I would do that without being paid to do it, right? I mean, I love the sport. So we are extremely blessed to be working in an industry we're so passionate about.
Go New York Knicks.
The flip side to that is that, and this is a challenge that we have, and we've got to constantly remind people, and including the team of great engineers and passionate product managers that we have, is that we are building it for an audience of consumers. So you have to make sure that your biases as a sports fan are always looked in context of data. And that's the big advantage that you have, especially in technology, right? You have so much of great data your fans are constantly giving to you. So I think that's something that discipline, it's something everyone has to be reminded of. Everyone gets it. Everyone has to be reminded of, saying that it's great that you're passionate, you have an opinion as a sports fan, but as a member of a business which is delivering value to a larger sports fan universe, you have a responsibility. And your responsibility is to react to the data you have, both towards your shareholders and to the sports fans. And obviously they're both linked, because if you deliver value to your sports fan, your consumer, automatically your shareholders will benefit.
Terrific. Sanjog, your comment on that with two mega groups that came together and how they've seen the business growing and their outlook?
I think investment in sport is just that. It's an investment at the end of the day, and every investor, as Anand would testify, would want to see a return on investment. Now, what metrics you use to define return could vary based on what your business objectives were when you got into the business. And your path to profitability or your path to getting to that business objective may be different, but at the end of the day, you're investing in a business to get to certain objectives. And those objectives evolve as the business matures, as all of us know. There is obviously nothing in this country that aggregates audiences like live cricket does, which has a certain meaning for the television business, which we run, and has a different meaning as far as the subscription business we have on Disney Plus Hotstar. Fundamentally, the goal is to have as many paying consumers or paying fans as possible, and then leverage the attention that you're garnering to get advertisers to pay for those eyeballs. And those are the fundamentals of the business, right? Having said that, there is belief that this space, even now, even years of evolution and existence for cricket, still need further investments to continue growing. Anand was talking about some numbers. The IPL is still not watched by more people than it is watched by people. And which just goes to show how much headroom for growth there is, even for a mature property, which is the biggest media property this country has. And it's about how do you get there and how do you make sure that everyone with access to a screen, whether TV or mobile, actually engages with IPL in some form or manner. And that's just cricket. With sports like kabaddi and football over the last 5 years reaching a certain scale. I mean, you know this. Football in markets like Kerala and West Bengal is actually bigger than cricket. The PKL, certain games in the PKL actually rate higher than the IPL in markets like AP, Telangana and Maharashtra. So these are green shoots, but these green shoots still need investments before they can reach a scale where the business objectives associated with these properties, the long-term business objectives can be met. So I think it's for us, it's like managing a portfolio. There are products in this portfolio which are at very different stages of their life cycle, and thus the return on those products and those experiences tends to be different. How quickly we can scale those up also depends on what stage of the life cycle the product is at. But fundamentally, we're like Anand manages a portfolio of investments. We manage a portfolio of investments which are at different stages of maturity and at different stages of returns. And that is what our outlook towards this business is. We are, as you know, the largest investor in cricket in the world. And there is no reason to believe that we won't continue to invest in cricket. At the same time, we're also the largest investor in football and kabaddi, two other sports in this country. And there's no reason to believe why we wouldn't continue investing in those two sports.
Fantastic. All points made very, very well and on point. And the professionals that you are, we've literally wrapped it up exactly in the time that IMC had allocated to us. So I think it's a great pleasure to have had all of you and to have had an opportunity to have a very meaningful interaction and discussion here. So my personal thanks, Anand, Sanjog and Yannick, to all three of you. Points, excellent conversation. I picked up a lot here and I learned a lot, as we always do when we speak. So on behalf of IMC, Rajiv and others, thanks for not only arranging this session, but thank you for your time and for your contribution as well. So I'll hand this back to you, Rajiv and Pranav, and I want to thank all the panelists once again.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
For participating. Harini, I'm going to hand it over to you to take over.
Thank you, Venki. Bye.
Thank you, gentlemen. Even though virtually, always good to connect with friends, Yannick, Sanjog, Venki, Mr. Krishnan. I think last 50 minutes have been all things informative and enriching about what the business of sport is post-pandemic. And thanks, gentlemen. Before we move on to the next session, can I please request all the participants and Selby to post the quiz question. Now, here's all your chance to win a cricket signed memorabilia. So all those participants who want to participate, the only trick is answer first and you'll be the winner. Selby, if you can sort of post the question, please. Well, that's the question that's come through. Guess the player in this picture. Now, I don't think it's going to be difficult for a lot of people who are on this panel. So whoever answers first, Selby, you can announce the winner.
Thank you, Harini.
All three results are possible.
Yes, we have the first person who has already answered. Anand Krishnan.
Thank you to everybody for participating. And Mr. Krishnan, you can sort of send in the details to IMC in terms of your contact details. They will connect with you and hand over the memorabilia.
Oh,
Thank you, Selby.
I didn't mean to. If you want to give it to somebody else, please do. I was just having fun.
Panelists not allowed to answer.
Oh yeah, so give it to the next person, please.
Yeah, I will do that. We don't want conflicts here. We don't want conflicts here.
No conflict at all. Please give it to the next person.
Okay.
Well done, Anand, though.
Yeah, so I'll just announce the next best answer that we got was Mr. Kaustubh Bhogle.
Okay, Kaustubh. So send in your details and thank Mr. Anand separately, maybe on social media if you reach him. And Kaustubh, send in your details to the IMC members. They'll connect with you and hand over the memorabilia. Thank you, Selby.